Welcome to the slow world. Close your eyes. Imagine the smell of pine and damp earth. The forest is breathing. In and out. Match its rhythm. You are safe here. Let's begin. The weight of noise. The house was not big, but on Tuesday evenings, it felt like it contained too much weather. The air in the kitchen was thick, charged with the static electricity of unspoken words and heavy sighs. Leo sat at the small dining table, pushing a green pea across his plate with a fork. He was 12 years old, an age that felt like wearing a coat that was slightly too tight. He watched his parents. His father was by the sink, scrubbing a pot with a force that was unnecessary. His shoulders were hunched, tight knots of tension visible even through his shirt. His mother sat across from Leo, staring at a stack of bills as if they were a difficult puzzle written in a foreign language. She rubbed her temples, a gesture Leo had seen 1,000 times. "We just need to be careful this month," his father said, his voice low but sharp, like a stone cracking. "I am being careful," his mother replied, her voice thinning like a wire stretched to its breaking point. "I am always careful." Then came the silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a loud, heavy silence that pressed against Leo's ears. He felt like he was taking up too much space. He felt that if he breathed too loudly, the delicate balance of the room would shatter. Leo stood up. Neither of them looked at him. They were trapped in their own invisible cages of worry. "I'm going outside," Leo said quietly. "Don't go far," his mother murmured automatically, not looking up from the papers. "Dinner is in 10 minutes. Leo walked out the back door. The screen door clicked shut behind him, cutting off the heavy air of the kitchen. Outside, the evening was cool. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Leo's backyard ended at a rusted chain-link fence. Beyond that fence lay the old woods. Most kids in the neighborhood didn't go into the old woods. They said it was boring or too thick with briars. There were stories, of course, old town legends about people getting lost, but Leo didn't care about ghosts. He cared about quiet. He climbed over the rusted fence, the metal cold against his palms. As soon as his feet touched the mossy ground on the other side, the world changed. It wasn't a dramatic flash of light. It was a subtle shift in density. The air here felt older. It smelled of deep, damp earth, pine resin, and something sweet like fermentation. The sounds of the town, the distant hum of cars, the barking of a neighbor's dog, the faint clatter of his father's dishes, vanished instantly. It was as if someone had turned the volume knob of the world down to 0. Leo walked. The trees here were different. In the town, trees were polite decorations, planted in rows. Here they were giants. Oaks with trunks as wide as cars, their bark rugged and deep like canyons. Pines that shot up straight and true, disappearing into a canopy so thick it blocked out the twilight. He walked until he found a small stream. The water was incredibly clear, flowing over smooth, gray stones. Leo sat down on a large root that curled out of the riverbank like a sleeping snake. He picked up a pebble and tossed it into the water. Ripples spread out, perfect concentric circles. He looked at his reflection in the water, a boy with messy hair and worried eyes. "I wish I didn't have to go back," he whispered to the water. "I wish I could just stay here until it all stops." The woods seemed to listen. The wind rustled the leaves above him, sounding like 1,000 people saying hush. Leo didn't know how long he sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. The light in the forest was fading, turning from gray to a deep, velvety blue. He decided he should probably head back before his mother panicked. Even if they were arguing, they would notice an empty chair. He stood up and turned back toward the fence. But the fence was gone. Where the rusted metal in the backyard should have been, there was only a wall of mist. It was a thick, white fog that swirled slowly, rising from the ground. It looked solid, impassable. Leo's heart hammered a rhythm against his ribs. He walked toward where the fence should be. He reached out his hand. The mist felt cold and solid, like a wall of packed snow. He pushed, but it gently pushed him back. "Hello," he called out. His voice didn't echo. The trees absorbed the sound instantly. He turned around. The forest behind him seemed to have stretched. The path he had walked was gone, replaced by a dense undergrowth of ferns that looked like they had been growing there for centuries. He was not in the woods behind his house anymore. He looked at the stream again. On the other side of the water, sitting on a mossy boulder, was a creature. It was a badger, but it was enormous, the size of a large dog. It wore a small vest made of woven grass and had a pair of spectacles perched on its nose. It was reading a book made of bark. The badger looked up. Its eyes were intelligent, dark, and filled with a strange, ancient patience. "You are early," the badger said. Its voice was deep and gravelly, like stones tumbling in a dryer. "Or perhaps you are late. Time is a difficult thing to track on the threshold." Leo stared. I just came from my house." "Your house is in the fast world," the badger said, closing its bark book with a soft thud. "You have stepped into the slow world, Leo." "How do you know my name?" Leo asked, his voice trembling. The badger climbed down from the rock. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace. "The trees remember names," the badger said. "I am Silas, and you, young Leo, have just made a wish to stay until the noise stops." Silas gestured around at the endless, darkening forest. "Be careful what you wish for. The noise of the world does not reach here, but neither does the time. A minute there is a month here, an hour there is a year." Leo did the math in his head. If he stayed for dinner, he would be an old man. "I have to go back," Leo said, stepping toward the mist. "You cannot," Silas said gently. "The mist has risen. It only lowers when the lesson is learned. You are a guest of the Aethelgard now." The badger turned and began to walk deeper into the woods. "Come," Silas called over his shoulder. "Night is falling, and you do not know how to build a shelter yet. You have a great deal to learn before the morning comes." Leo looked at the wall of mist. He looked at the retreating badger. He realized he had no choice. He took a deep breath of the pine-scented air, stepped over the stream, and followed the badger into the deep, timeless dark. The first night of 100 years. The deeper Leo walked into the forest, the more he realized that this was not a place of chaos. It was a place of immense, overwhelming order. In the human world, things felt rushed and cluttered. But here, every fern seemed to have chosen its spot with great consideration. Every fallen branch lay exactly where it was meant to be to feed the moss. Silas the badger walked ahead on 2 legs, using a gnarled walking stick. The lantern he held, which was simply a glass jar filled with glowing fireflies, cast a warm, yellow circle of light on the path. "Where are we going?" Leo asked. The silence of the forest was so deep that he felt the need to whisper. "To the hollow," Silas replied without stopping. "It is safe there. The night winds can be cold for someone without fur." They walked for what felt like hours. Leo's legs began to ache. He was just a boy, used to sitting in school desks and on sofas. The uneven ground, the roots, and the soft mulch were working muscles he didn't know he had. "I'm hungry," Leo said. It was a complaint that usually worked at home. Silas stopped. He turned around and looked at Leo over the rim of his spectacles. "Hunger is a question," Silas said. "Nature is the answer, but you must know how to ask." The badger poked his walking stick into a pile of dry leaves near the base of an oak tree. He uncovered a cluster of small, brown mushrooms. "Not these," Silas said. "These will make you sleep for a week." He moved a few feet away and pointed to a bush with dark, serrated leaves. "And not these berries. They will give you a stomach ache that feels like swallowing hot coals." Leo stepped back, looking at the forest with new suspicion. Everything looked dangerous now. Silas chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. He reached up and plucked a different kind of nut from a low-hanging branch. It had a smooth, hard shell. "This is an iron nut," Silas said. "Crack it." He tossed it to Leo. Leo tried to crack it with his hands. Impossible. He tried to bite it. He nearly broke a tooth. "I can't," Leo said, frustrated. "You lack the tool," Silas said, "and you lack the patience." The badger picked up 2 stones, one flat and large, one small and round. He placed the nut on the flat stone. He lifted the round stone. He didn't smash it. He tapped it, finding the seam of the nut. Tap, tap, crack. The shell split cleanly in 2, revealing a white, fleshy meat inside. Silas handed it to Leo. Leo ate it. It tasted rich, like butter and roasted chestnuts. It was the most delicious thing he had ever eaten, perhaps because he had to work for it. "In the fast world," Silas said, resuming his walk, "you trade paper for food. Here you trade attention. You must pay attention to eat." They finally arrived at the hollow. It was a massive, ancient tree that had fallen centuries ago. But instead of rotting, it had petrified into stone. The inside of the hollow trunk was dry and lined with soft, dry grass. It was like a natural cave. "This is your home," Silas said. "For now." Leo looked at the dark hole. "Where will you sleep?" "I have my own burrow," Silas said. "I will see you when the sun wakes the birds." "Wait," Leo said, panic rising in his chest again. "How long do I have to stay here? You said an hour is a year. My parents, they'll be worried." Silas looked at the boy with sadness. "In their time, you have been gone for 10 seconds, Silas said. "They haven't even noticed you left the table yet. You have time, Leo. You have so much time." Silas turned and vanished into the shadows of the undergrowth. Leo crawled into the hollow tree. It smelled of dry wood and sage. He curled up on the pile of grass. It was surprisingly comfortable. He lay there, looking out at the forest. The fireflies from Silas's lantern had dispersed, drifting up into the canopy like floating stars. Leo thought about his kitchen. He visualized his father scrubbing the pot. He visualized his mother staring at the bills. In his world, the clock on the kitchen wall was ticking. Tick, tock. But here, between that tick and that talk, Leo had to live a whole life. He felt a tear roll down his cheek. It felt hot in the cool air. He brushed it away. He closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, there was no hum of a refrigerator, no cars, no television, just the breathing of the trees. Leo fell asleep, and the first night of his long exile began. The architecture of rain. Leo's first morning in the Aethelgard did not begin with sunlight. It began with the color gray. He woke up in the hollow of the petrified tree, his body stiff and curled tight against the chill. The air outside the hollow was thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and wet dust. The birds were silent. The leaves hung motionless on the branches, waiting. Then the sky opened. It wasn't a gentle shower. In the fast world, rain was something you watched from behind a window pane or dashed through to get to the car. Here, rain was a physical presence. It was an ocean falling from the sky. It started as a whisper in the high canopy, miles above. Then it became a roar. Water cascaded down through the layers of the forest. It dripped from the broad oak leaves, channeled down the grooves of the pine bark, and splattered onto the forest floor. Leo retreated deeper into his hollow log, but the log, ancient as it was, had cracks. A cold drop hit his neck, then another on his knee. The dry sanctuary he had slept in was turning into a damp cave. Water seeped up through the moss. Mud began to form at the entrance. Leo panicked. He scrambled out of the log, shielding his head with his arms. He needed a roof, a real roof. He ran to a pile of fallen branches. He grabbed handfuls of large, flat fern leaves. He threw them over the opening of the hollow log. He piled sticks on top to hold them down. He worked frantically, his clothes soaking through, his hair plastered to his forehead. He stepped back to admire his work. A gust of wind blew. The pile of loose leaves scattered instantly. The sticks rolled away. The rain poured into his home, indifferent to his efforts. Leo sat down in the mud. He felt small. He felt cold. He felt a sudden, sharp longing for the sturdy shingles of his house and the hum of the central heating. "You build like a bird that has lost its mind," a voice rumbled. Leo wiped the rain from his eyes. Silas the badger was sitting under the shelter of a massive, shelf-like fungus growing from a tree trunk. He was perfectly dry. "I tried," Leo shouted over the sound of the rain. "It keeps falling down." "Because you are just stacking," Silas said, stepping out from his shelter. He didn't seem to mind the rain. It rolled off his coarse fur as if he were oiled. "Gravity is not enough to hold a home together, Leo. You need tension." The badger waddled over to a patch of willow saplings growing near the stream. "Watch," Silas commanded. He bit off 3 long, flexible switches of willow. He brought them back to Leo. "Nature weaves," Silas said. "Look at the bird's nest. Look at the spider's web. Nothing is just placed. Everything is locked." Silas took the twigs in his paws, which were surprisingly dexterous, like hands wearing heavy leather gloves. He laid 2 twigs parallel. He took the third and wove it, over, under, over. He pulled it tight. The friction held the sticks together. They didn't slide. They became a single unit. "You must make a fabric out of wood," Silas said, handing the woven piece to Leo. Go, cut the willow, weave the roof. Do not just cover the hole, build the cover. Leo took the willow switch. For the next week, or what felt like a week in the slow time of the forest, Leo worked. The rain continued, a relentless gray curtain. Leo was wet the entire time, but he stopped noticing the cold. He was too focused. He learned that green wood bends, but dry wood snaps. He learned that if you weave too loosely, the water runs through. If you weave too tightly, the branches break. He learned the rhythm of the maker, over, under, pull, over, under, pull. His hands, soft from holding video game controllers and pencils, became raw. Then they became tough. He developed calluses on his thumbs. He got cuts from the bark, but he didn't cry over them. He just wiped them on his jeans and kept weaving. Slowly, a structure began to form. It was a curved, woven canopy, shaped like the shell of a turtle. It was dense and tight. Leo layered fern leaves between the weave, locking them in place so the wind couldn't steal them. When he was finished, he dragged the structure over the opening of his hollow log. He wedged it into place. He crawled inside. The sound of the rain changed. Outside, it was a roar, but inside, under his woven roof, it was a gentle, rhythmic drumming. Tap, tap, tap. He touched the floor. It was drying out. He looked up. Not a single drop came through. The weave held. The tension held. Leo lay back on his bed of dried grass. He smelled the scent of fresh, cut willow and damp earth. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't just warmth. It was pride. In the fast world, if he wanted a roof, his father hired a man. If he wanted a toy, he bought it. He had never made anything that kept him alive before. Silas appeared at the entrance of the shelter. He poked his striped head in. He looked at the roof. He poked the weave with his claw. It didn't budge. Adequate, the badger grunted. You are beginning to understand the friction of things. It took forever, Leo said, looking at his scarred hands. It took exactly as long as it needed to take, Silas corrected. The rain didn't hurry. Why should you? The badger vanished into the wet twilight. Leo closed his eyes. He listened to the rain drumming on the roof he had built with his own hands. For the first time, the sound didn't make him feel lonely. It made him feel safe. He had spun a piece of the forest into a shield, and it held. The language of wood. Time in the Aethelgard did not move in straight lines. It moved in circles, like the rings of a tree. Leo had stopped counting the days. He tracked time by the light. There was the silver light morning, the gold light afternoon, and the blue light twilight. He had a shelter. He had found a steady supply of iron nuts and wild greens. But he had a problem. Eating stewed berries with his hands was messy. Drinking water from the stream with cupped palms was inefficient. I need a spoon, Leo announced one morning. He was sitting with Silas by the stream. The badger was busy grooming his tail. A spoon, Silas repeated. A noble ambition. Why don't you get one? I don't have any money, Leo said automatically. Then he stopped. I mean, there is no store. Correct, Silas said. There is only the source. If you want a spoon, you must ask the wood for one. Leo looked at the trees around him. How? With a sharp question, Silas said. You need a knife. Leo sighed. I don't have a knife either. Then you must ask the stone first. The lesson of the 4th month was geology. Silas took Leo to the riverbed. It was filled with thousands of gray stones. To Leo, they all looked the same. You are looking at the surface, Silas chided. You must look at the heart. You need flint or obsidian, stone that wants to break into a razor. Leo spent days wading in the cold water. He picked up rocks and smashed them against other rocks. Most of them just crumbled into dust or broke into dull chunks. Listen to the sound, Silas instructed from the bank. Dull stone makes a thud. Sharp stone makes a ring. Finally, Leo found a nodule of dark, glassy stone. He struck it against a larger boulder. Clack. A flake flew off. It was shaped like a teardrop, and its edge was so thin it was transparent. Leo picked it up carefully. He touched the edge with his thumb. A thin line of red appeared on his skin. It was sharper than any razor blade in his father's bathroom. He had a blade. Now he needed the wood. He found a fallen branch of birch. It was pale and soft. He sat down on his favorite root. He held the wood in his left hand and the stone flake in his right. He visualized a spoon. He visualized the plastic spoon he used for yogurt at home. He tried to force the wood to become that shape. He hacked at it. He scraped. The wood resisted. It splintered. It cracked. The stone slipped and gouged a line where Leo didn't want one. After 3 hours, he had a pile of wood chips and a jagged, broken stick that looked nothing like a spoon. Leo threw the stick into the river in frustration. "Stupid wood," he yelled. Silas, who had been napping in the sun, opened one eye. "The wood is not stupid," the badger said calmly. "It is just being wood. You are trying to force it to be plastic." Silas walked over. He picked up a fresh piece of birch. "Wood has a direction, Leo. It has a grain. It flows just like the river. If you cut against the flow, it fights you. If you cut with the flow, it yields." He handed the wood to Leo. "Don't tell the wood what to be," Silas said softly. "Ask it what it is willing to become. Work with the grain. If there is a knot, go around it. If the fibers twist, you turn your hand." Leo picked up his stone flake again. He closed his eyes for a moment. He ran his finger along the wood, feeling the texture. He felt the direction of the fibers. He began to cut. This time he didn't hack, he shaved. He took long, curling strips off the wood. SHHH, SHHH, SHHH. He followed the lines of the tree. Where the wood was hard, he went shallow. Where it was soft, he went deep. He stopped trying to make a perfect, round, factory-made spoon. He let the spoon follow the shape of the branch. The handle was slightly curved because the branch was curved. The bowl was deep because there was a knot that allowed for depth. He worked for days. He sat in the sun, the pile of white shavings growing around his feet like snow. He fell into a trance. He forgot about his parents' arguments. He forgot about his grades in school. There was only the wood, the stone, and the movement of his hand. He realized this was what his father felt when he was washing the dishes so aggressively. His father was fighting the pot. He was fighting the dirt. He was fighting his life. He's going against the grain, Leo thought suddenly. Dad is trying to force things that won't move. The thought made Leo pause. He looked at the spoon in his hand. It was finished. It wasn't perfectly symmetrical. The handle was a bit crooked. but it was smooth. It felt warm in his hand. It was strong. He dipped it into the stream and brought it to his lips. The water stayed in the bowl. "It works," Leo whispered. He showed it to Silas. The badger took the spoon. He examined it closely. He ran a claw over the bowl. "It is an honest spoon," Silas said. "It has the story of the tree in it." He handed it back. "You have made a tool, Leo, which means you are no longer just a survivor. You are a craftsman." Leo tucked the spoon into his belt. He felt a weight to it that had nothing to do with gravity. It was the weight of competence. He looked at his hands. They were dirty, scarred, and strong. They were hands that could turn a stone into a knife and a branch into a spoon. He wondered what else they could do. "Come," Silas said, turning toward the deeper woods. "Now that you can feed yourself properly, it is time to learn how to listen. The forest has much to say, and you have finally stopped making enough noise to hear it." The map of scents. Summer in the Aethelgard was not defined by heat, but by density. The canopy of leaves overhead grew so thick that the forest floor existed in a perpetual green twilight. Leo had been in the forest for what felt like 6 months. His jeans were frayed at the hems, and his t-shirt was stained with blackberry juice and grass. He moved differently now. He didn't stomp. He walked with his weight on the balls of his feet, testing the ground before committing to a step. But Silas was not satisfied. "You are still looking," the badger grumbled one morning. "You trust your eyes too much. Eyes can be tricked. Shadow looks like a hole. A leaf looks like a moth." Silas reached into his satchel and pulled out a strip of soft, dark moss cloth. "Turn around," Silas commanded. Before Leo could protest, the badger tied the cloth over Leo's eyes. The world went black. "Hey," Leo reached up. "Leave it," Silas ordered. "Today we walk without seeing." "I'll crash into a tree," Leo argued. "Only if you don't listen to your nose," Silas replied. "The air is not empty, Leo. It is a map. Every direction has a scent." Silas nudged him forward with his walking stick. "Walk." Leo took a hesitant step. He reached his hands out like a zombie, terrified of hitting an obstacle. He shuffled. He stumbled over a root and nearly fell. "Stop flailing," Silas's voice came from the right. "Breathe. What do you smell?" Leo took a breath. "Dirt, pine needles." "Deeper," Silas urged. "Turn your head to the left. What is there?" Leo turned left. He inhaled slowly. At first, it just smelled like forest. But then he caught a subtle difference. It smelled dank, wet, like old, wet paper. "It smells soggy," Leo said. "That is the north," Silas explained. "The sun never touches the moss on the north side of the great oaks. It is the scent of rot. Rot is north." "Now turn right," Silas directed. Leo turned. The air here felt drier. It prickled his nose. It smelled sharp, sweet, and resinous. "Pine sap," Leo guessed, "and heat." "The south," Silas confirmed. "The pines grow on the southern ridge where the sun hits. The heat cooks the resin. Amber is south." For the next few hours, they played this strange game. Silas guided him with voice commands, but mostly, he forced Leo to navigate by scent. Leo began to build a new map in his head. He learned the metallic, cold scent of the stream, west. He learned the musky, dusty scent of the fox dens east. He learned that a mushroom smells like copper before you even step on it. At one point, the air grew heavy and sweet, almost cloying. "Stop," Leo said instinctively. "Bees." "Very good," Silas whispered close to his ear. "A hive in the dead trunk ahead. If you had relied on your eyes, you would have walked right into it." By the time Silas allowed him to remove the blindfold, the sun was setting. Leo blinked, the colors of the forest rushing back in a vibrant flood. But he realized that the visual world now felt flat compared to the rich, three-dimensional tapestry of smells he had just experienced. He looked at his parents' world in his memory. It was a world of deodorizers and exhaust fumes, a world where people tried to cover up smells. Here, the smell was the story. "You are learning," Silas said, untying the cloth. "The eyes tell you what things are, but the nose tells you where they are and how they are." They walked back to the hollow in the gathering dark. Leo didn't need the lantern. He could smell the wood smoke of their campfire waiting for them. He could smell home. The winter of silence. The change happened overnight. Leo went to sleep in a world of browns and greens. He woke up in a world of white. The temperature had plummeted. The woven roof of his shelter was heavy and sagging. When he pushed his way out of the hollow log, he gasped. Snow. But not the slushy, gray snow of the city streets. This was deep, pristine powder. It covered the roots, the ferns, the rocks. It smoothed the world into soft, undulating shapes. The silence was absolute. The snow absorbed every sound. No birds sang. The stream was frozen over, trapped beneath a sheet of ice. "The long sleep," Silas said, emerging from his own burrow. He looked like a giant, grumpy snowball. "We will not be traveling far for a while, Leo." The winter of the Aethelgard was not like a winter at home. At home, winter meant school, sledding, and holidays. Here, winter meant confinement. For the first few days, Leo played in the snow. He built a fort. He threw snowballs at a tree. But the cold was relentless. His fingers went numb quickly. He was forced to retreat to his shelter, where he kept a small fire burning in a stone circle Silas had helped him build near the entrance. Then the boredom set in. Real, crushing boredom. There was no television, no phone, no books, no friends. Silas spent most of the day sleeping, conserving his energy. Leo sat in his hollow log. He stared at the woven ceiling. He stared at the fire. His mind began to itch. He felt a physical need for stimulation. He wanted to see a flashing screen. He wanted to hear a song. He wanted something to happen. He started to pace, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. "I hate this," he said to the empty air. "I hate this place." He thought of his mother sitting at the table, staring at the wall. Was this how she felt? Trapped. He thought of his father, always moving, always cleaning, unable to sit still. Was he running from this feeling, this silence? Leo sat down. He picked up a piece of firewood. He looked at it. Since there was nothing else to do, he really looked at it. He saw the rings of the wood. He counted them. 40 rings. This piece of wood was older than his father. He saw a tiny tunnel bored by a beetle. He saw a patch of dried lichen that looked like a map of an island. He spent an hour just looking at the wood. Then he looked at the fire. He watched how the blue flame danced at the base of the log and how the orange flame licked the top. He noticed that different woods burned with different colors. Birch burned bright and fast. Oak burned slow and red. The days stretched into weeks, the weeks into months. Leo stopped pacing. The itch in his brain faded. He learned to sit perfectly still. When he sat still, he noticed things he had never seen before. He saw a mouse tunnel under the snow, visible only by the slight disturbance of the surface crystals. He saw the way the light changed on the icicles hanging from his roof, turning them from diamonds to daggers as the sun moved. He realized that boredom was just a failure of attention. The world was never boring. It was always moving, always changing, just very, very slowly. One evening, Silas came to visit. He brought a pot of tea brewed from pine needles. They sat by the fire in silence. They didn't speak for an hour. In the fast world, this silence would have been awkward. Leo would have felt the need to fill it with chatter. But here, the silence felt comfortable. It was a shared thing, a warm blanket. "You have stopped fidgeting," Silas observed, sipping his tea. "There's nowhere to go," Leo said softly. "There is always somewhere to go," Silas tapped his own forehead. "But usually, people are too busy running outside to visit the inside." Leo looked into the fire. "I used to think my dad was angry because he was always doing things. Scrubbing, fixing, moving." Silas nodded. Motion is often a disguise for fear. "I think," Leo paused, surprised by his own thought. "I think he's afraid that if he stops, he'll have to think about how sad he is." The realization settled on Leo like the snow outside. Heavy, but true. His father wasn't angry. He was terrified of the silence. Because in the silence, the worries got loud. "And you?" Silas asked. "Are you afraid of the silence now?" Leo listened to the wind howling softly outside the shelter. He listened to his own heartbeat. "No," Leo said. "Not anymore." "Good," Silas said, placing his cup down. "Because the snow is melting, the spring is coming, and you have grown taller, Leo. Your mind has caught up with your hands." Leo looked out the entrance. A single drop of water fell from an icicle. Plip. The world was waking up, and Leo knew that when he eventually went back, if he went back, he would bring this silence with him. He would bring it to his father like a gift. The river of glass. The silence of winter did not end with a whisper. It ended with a roar. When the thaw finally came to the Aethelgard, it was violent. The sun turned sharp and bright, piercing the canopy. The deep drifts of snow that had blanketed the forest floor for months turned to slush, and then to water. Millions of gallons of water. The small, polite stream that Leo had stepped over on his first day was gone. In its place was a monster. The water was a churning ribbon of turquoise and white, moving with terrifying speed. It carried debris, branches, chunks of ice, entire bushes, smashing them against the boulders. It carved new banks, eating away the earth. Leo stood on the safe, high ground near his hollow tree, watching the violence of the river. "The arteries of the forest are clearing," Silas said, standing beside him. The badger sniffed the damp air. "Be careful where you step. The ground is treacherous." Leo was about to turn back to the fire when he saw it. In the middle of the swollen river, a large, flat rock jutted out of the spray. It was the only dry spot in the chaos. And on that rock, shivering and wet, was a fawn. It was tiny, its coat still dappled with the white spots of infancy. It must have tried to cross when the water was lower and gotten stranded as the surge hit. Its mother was pacing frantically on the far bank, bleating a sound of pure distress. "We have to help it," Leo said instantly. He took a step toward the water. Silas blocked his path with his walking stick. "The water is freezing, Leo. The current is strong enough to crush bone against stone. If you go in, you will be swept away to the gray delta. You will not survive." "I can't just watch it die," Leo said, his voice rising. "Then do not use your body," Silas said calmly. "Use your mind. You are a tool maker now." Leo looked at the river. He looked at the fawn, whose legs were buckling with exhaustion. He needed a platform, something stable. He ran to his woodpile. He grabbed 3 thick logs of pine he had gathered before the snow fell. They were heavy, seasoned, and buoyant. He dragged them to the water's edge. He remembered the lesson of the roof. Tension holds things together. He didn't have rope, but he had the vines of the wild grape that grew thick in the undergrowth. They were pliable and tough. Leo worked with a feverish intensity. He lashed the 3 logs together. He didn't just wrap the vines. He used a figure eight knot Silas had taught him, pulling it so tight the vine bit into the bark. He created a crude raft. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. He grabbed a long, stout pole of ash wood to use as a rudder. "I'm going," Leo said. He pushed the raft into the eddy near the bank. The cold water shocked his hands, numbing them instantly. He jumped onto the logs. The current grabbed him. It felt like a giant hand had seized the raft and thrown it forward. The world became a blur of white spray and passing trees. Leo slammed the ash pole into the riverbed, fighting to steer. The river fought back. It wanted to spin him, to capsize him. "Don't fight the force," he remembered Silas saying about the wood grain. "Use the flow." He stopped trying to paddle upstream. He angled the raft diagonally, letting the current push him across the river as he moved downstream. It was a vector of force. He aimed for the rock. He was coming in too fast. If he hit the rock, the raft would shatter. Leo jammed the pole into the water, bracing his feet. He leaned his entire weight back. The pole bent, groaning under the pressure. The raft shuddered, slowed, and swung around into the calm pocket of water behind the rock. The raft bumped gently against the stone. The fawn looked at him with huge, terrified eyes. It was shivering violently. "It's okay," Leo whispered, keeping his voice low and steady. "I've got you." He reached out. He didn't grab, he waited. The fawn took a step forward, then another. It stepped onto the logs. The raft dipped under the weight, water washing over Leo's boots. Leo pushed off. The return journey was harder. The raft was heavier now. The mother deer on the bank watched them, her ears swiveling. Leo had to fight for every inch. His arms burned. His lungs felt like they were filled with ice. But he didn't panic. He focused on the rhythm. Plant the pole, push, recover, plant, push. He drove the raft into the mud of the bank. The fawn leaped off. It stumbled, found its footing, and scrambled up the slope. The mother nudged it once, checking for injuries, and then they vanished into the trees. Neither looked back. Leo collapsed onto the muddy bank. He lay on his back, staring at the blue sky. He was soaked, freezing, and exhausted. Silas walked over and looked down at him. "You risked your life for a creature that did not thank you," the badger observed. "I didn't do it for thanks," Leo gasped, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I did it because I could." "Responsibility," Silas nodded slowly. "It is the burden of the capable. Once you know how to build a raft, you are obligated to use it." Leo lay there, feeling the cold seep into his bones, but feeling a fire in his chest. He realized that this was what his parents did every day. They carried heavy loads through dangerous waters, bills, jobs, worries, not because they wanted praise, but because the family was on the raft. They were fighting the current to keep him dry. For the first time, he didn't see his father's work as a chore. He saw it as a rescue. The spider's loom. Spring turned to early summer, and Leo faced a new problem. He was growing. The jeans he had worn into the forest were now inches above his ankles. His t-shirt was little more than a rag, torn by thorns and worn thin by washing in the river. The zipper on his jacket had rusted shut long ago. He looked like a wild thing. "You need a new skin," Silas said one morning, inspecting a large tear in Leo's sleeve. "You cannot survive the briars and tatters." "I can't weave clothes out of branches," Leo said. "No," Silas agreed. "Wood is for shelter. For skin, you need thread. You must visit the weaver." The weaver lived in the darker part of the forest, where the ancient yew trees grew so close together that the sun rarely touched the ground. As they approached, Leo noticed the texture of the air changed. It felt sticky. Strands of silk, thick as fishing line, crisscrossed the path. They shimmered with a pearlescent sheen. In the center of a clearing, suspended between four massive trees, was a web the size of a circus tent. And in the center of the web sat the weaver. She was a spider, but she was beautiful in a terrifying way. Her body was the size of a barrel, covered in velvet black fur with markings of silver and gold. She had 8 eyes that glittered like obsidian beads. Leo froze. He hated spiders. "She will not eat you," Silas whispered. "She is a vegetarian. She eats only the light that gets trapped in her web." They walked to the edge of the clearing. "Greetings, grandmother," Silas called out. The weaver descended on a single thread. She moved with a fluid, hypnotic elegance. She landed silently on the soft earth. "A two-legged guest." The weaver's voice was a whispery hiss, like dry silk rubbing together. "He looks unraveled." "He needs to learn the loom," Silas said. The weaver looked at Leo with her multiple eyes. "Patience is the price of silk. Do you have it?" "I built a raft," Leo said, trying to sound brave. "Building is force," the weaver said. "Weaving is tension. It is a different strength." She gestured with a long, delicate leg toward a patch of tall, stinging nettles growing at the edge of the clearing. "Harvest the nettles," she commanded. "Strip the fibers, twist the thread, then we will talk." It was a grueling task. The nettles stung Leo's hands, raising white welts. He had to crush the stalks, peel away the woody outer layer, and extract the long, thin fibers inside. Then came the spinning. The weaver showed him how to roll the fibers against his thigh to twist them into a strong cord. It required a touch that was barely there. If he pressed too hard, the fibers broke. If he pressed too light, they unraveled. He spent weeks in the clearing. He watched the weaver work on her great web. He watched how she repaired the tears caused by the wind. She didn't just patch it. She re-engineered the tension of the entire structure so the hole closed itself. Leo struggled. His thread was lumpy. It broke constantly. He wanted to scream. "You are tight," the weaver observed, hanging upside down above him. "Your mind is a knot. You cannot weave a smooth thread with a knotted mind." Leo took a deep breath. He thought of his mother. He remembered her sitting on the sofa, mending his father's work shirts. He remembered her hands moving with a needle, in and out, in and out. He used to think she was just watching TV, doing something mindless. Now he realized the incredible dexterity it required. She was holding the family together, quite literally, stitch by stitch. The thinning wire of her voice wasn't weakness. It was the high tension of a thread being pulled to its limit to hold a heavy weight. "I'm sorry, Mom," Leo whispered. He relaxed his hands. He stopped trying to force the fibers. He let them twist naturally. The thread became smooth. It became strong. When he had enough cord, the weaver showed him how to use a simple loom made of branches. He wove a rough fabric. It wasn't soft like cotton, but it was tough and warm. He sewed a simple tunic. It was gray and green, the color of the forest. When he put it on, he felt transformed. He wasn't a boy in ruined school clothes anymore. He was a part of the forest. "You have made a second skin," the weaver said, touching the fabric with a sensitive leg. "It will protect you, but remember the lesson of the thread. Strength comes from being flexible. If you are too rigid, you snap." Leo thanked her. He bowed to the giant spider, his fear completely gone, replaced by awe for her artistry. He walked back to his hollow tree with Silas. He ran his hand over the rough weave of his new tunic. He thought about the thinness of his mother again. He realized she wasn't breaking. She was just stretched. And he wondered if, when he returned, he could be the one to patch the holes in the fabric of their family so she could finally relax the tension. The Library of Stone. Summer in the Aethelgard reached its peak. The heat was not oppressive, but it was heavy. The air smelled of baking pine needles and dry dust. Leo was exploring a ridge of limestone cliffs on the western edge of his territory. He was confident now. His tunic blended with the ferns. His feet were tough enough to walk over gravel without flinching. He carried a basket of woven willow on his back, filled with mushrooms and late berries. He was looking for shade. The sun was high, and the limestone reflected the heat. He found a fissure in the rock face. It was hidden behind a curtain of hanging ivy, visible only because the leaves were fluttering in a draft of cool air coming from within. Leo pushed the ivy aside and squeezed through the crack. He expected a shallow cave, perhaps a bare den. What he found was a hallway. The natural tunnel widened into a massive, circular cavern. The ceiling was high and domed, pierced by a natural skylight, a hole in the forest floor far above. That let a single, focused beam of sunlight strike the center of the room. But it was the walls that made Leo drop his basket. They were covered in art. Thousands of drawings. Some were scratched into the soft limestone with sharp rocks. Some were painted with red ochre, charcoal, and berry juice. Leo walked to the nearest wall. He touched a drawing of a stick figure standing next to a giant tree. The pigment was dry and faded, likely centuries old. "The Hall of the Lost," Silas said. The badger had followed him in quietly, his claws clicking softly on the stone floor. "Who did this?" Leo whispered. "Children," Silas replied. "You are not the first to step through the mist, Leo, and you will not be the last." Leo walked along the wall. He saw a drawing of a boy holding a sword that looked like it was made of wood. He saw a drawing of a girl sitting with a bear. He saw dates scratched into the rock: 1924, 1888, 1705. There were Roman numerals. There were symbols Leo didn't recognize. He realized with a jolt that the Aethelgard had been taking children for a very long time. He stopped at a section that looked different. The drawings here were angry, jagged lines of charcoal, dark, heavy shading. He saw a picture of a house with the door closed. He saw a picture of two large figures shouting at a small figure. He saw a picture of a clock with no hands. Leo ran his fingers over the charcoal. It rubbed off on his skin. "They were running away too," Leo said. "Everyone who comes here is running from something," Silas said, sitting on his haunches. "The forest does not open for the happy. It opens for the hollow. It opens for those who need to be filled." Leo felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was a mixture of sadness and relief. Back home, he had felt completely alone. He thought his misery was unique. He thought no one else understood what it felt like to be invisible in your own house. But looking at these walls, he saw 1,000 stories just like his. He saw the loneliness of a Victorian chimney sweep. He saw the fear of a girl fleeing a war. He saw the boredom of a prince. They were all here. They had all sat by these fires. They had all learned to weave and carve. "Did they go back?" Leo asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Silas walked to the center of the room, into the beam of sunlight. "Look up," the badger said. Leo looked at the ceiling. Around the skylight, etched deep into the stone where the light was brightest, were words. "I am ready. Thank you, I forgive them, going home." "Most go back," Silas said, "when they are full, when they have learned that the silence is not their enemy." "And the ones who don't?" Leo asked. Silas didn't answer immediately. He looked at his own paws, striped with age. "Some stay," Silas said softly. "Some find that the forest is the only family they need. They become guardians." Leo looked at the badger, really looked at him. He saw the intelligence in the dark eyes. He saw the weariness. He wondered, for the first time, if Silas had always been a badger, or if, a long, long time ago, he had been a boy who decided that the fast world was not worth the return. Leo spent the rest of the day in the cave. He didn't draw anything. He wasn't ready yet. Instead, he read the walls. He read the history of human loneliness. And in that dark, cool stone room, he felt a connection to humanity that he had never felt in the crowded streets of his city. He wasn't an outcast. He was a member of a secret club, the Club of the Lost and Found. When he walked back to his hollow tree that evening, the forest felt less like a wilderness and more like a school that had been standing for 1,000 years. The fox's bargain. The lesson of the 10th month was justice. Leo had been smoking strips of fish over his fire. He had built a smoker out of bark and green wood checking it every hour for 2 days. It was tedious work, but it meant he would have food for the rainy season. He went to the stream to wash his face. When he returned, the smoker was knocked over. The fish was gone. Leo stood still, his hands clenching into fists. He felt a hot, bright flare of anger. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the violation. He had worked for that. It was his. He looked at the ground. The moss was disturbed. There were tracks, small, narrow prints with claw marks. "Fox," Leo hissed. He grabbed his walking staff. He grabbed his stone knife. "I'm going to get it back," he told Silas, who was watching from the shade. "Then you had better be quiet," Silas noted. "A fox hears a leaf fall from a mile away." Leo tracked the thief. He used the skills he had learned. He didn't look for the animal, he looked for the disturbance. A broken fern frond, a smear of mud on a root, a few red hairs caught on a briar. He tracked the scent, musk and stolen fish, for 3 miles, deep into the rocky hills of the east. He moved silently, placing his feet with the care of a predator. The anger in his chest was a cold, hard knot. He wanted to yell. He wanted to punish. He tracked the fox to a narrow ravine, blocked by a fallen log. He crept up to the log and peered over. The fox was there. It was a vixen, small and ragged. Her coat was dull, not the bright, fiery red of a healthy animal. She was panting, her ribs showing through her fur. She wasn't eating the fish. She was dropping it onto the ground in front of a small, dark hole in the rocks. From the hole, a kit emerged. It was tiny, barely old enough to walk. It wobbled. Its eyes were crusted shut with infection. It sniffed the fish weakly but didn't eat. It just curled up, shivering. The mother fox nudged the kit. She made a low, whining sound. She tore a tiny piece of fish and tried to push it into the kit's mouth. The kit turned away. Leo's grip on his staff loosened. The cold knot of anger in his chest dissolved, replaced by something heavy and aching. He realized he was looking at a mirror. He saw the desperation in the mother fox's movements. She wasn't a thief. She was a mother who was failing to save her child. She had risked her life, stolen from a human, run for miles, all for a baby that was too sick to eat. Leo thought of his father's frantic cleaning. He thought of his mother's panic over the bills. They steal time from me, Leo thought, because they are trying to keep us alive. Leo stepped back from the log. A twig snapped. The vixen spun around. She saw him. She didn't run. She stood over her sick kit, baring her teeth, growling a low, terrifying sound. She was ready to die to protect the small, shivering ball of fur. Leo slowly lowered his staff. He placed it on the ground. He raised his hands. "I'm not going to hurt him," Leo whispered. He reached into his pouch. He took out his wooden spoon. He took out a bundle of dried herbs, feverfew and goldenrod, that Silas had taught him to identify. "I can help," Leo said. The fox watched him, her muscles coiled like springs. Leo sat down. He didn't move toward them. He started a small fire with his flint. He put water in his tin cup, which he had found in the debris of the river. He added the herbs. He brewed a tea. He waited for it to cool. Then he moved, very slowly. He crawled toward the fox. She snapped at the air, but she didn't attack. She seemed to sense the change in his intent. The scent of the herbs was soothing. Leo dipped his wooden spoon into the medicine. He held it out to the kit. The mother watched, trembling. She let him get close. Leo touched the spoon to the kit's nose. The kit smelled the warm liquid. It licked, then it drank. Leo fed the kit for an hour, spoonful by spoonful. He cleaned its eyes with a damp cloth. The mother fox watched him the whole time. Eventually, she lay down, her head on her paws, her eyes fixed on Leo. The hostility was gone. There was only exhaustion and a tentative trust. When the kit finally fell asleep, breathing easier, Leo stood up. He left the rest of the fish. "You need it more than I do," he told the mother. He turned to leave. The vixen stood up. She trotted over to a pile of leaves near her den. She dug something up. She brought it to Leo and dropped it at his feet. It was a stone. It was smooth, dark, and shaped like a needle. Leo picked it up. It felt strange. It seemed to pull at his hand. When he placed it on his flat palm, the stone spun. It stopped, pointing steadily toward the dense, dark trees of the north. "A lodestone," Silas's voice came from the top of the ravine. The badger was looking down, smiling. "A natural magnet. She has given you a compass, Leo." Leo looked at the fox. She dipped her head once, then turned back to her kit. "Why?" Leo asked Silas as they walked back. "She stole from me." "And you gave her mercy," Silas said. "Justice is not about returning pain for pain. Justice is about restoring balance. She took your fish. You saved her future. The forest considers that a debt paid." Leo held the magnetic stone tight. He had lost a week's worth of food, but he had gained a tool that could show him the way home whenever he was ready to take it. And more importantly, he had learned that sometimes a thief is just a parent who has run out of options. The Echo Lake. Autumn returned to the Aethelgard. The leaves turned the color of fire and gold, falling slowly to create a thick, rustling carpet on the forest floor. Leo was older now. By the reckoning of the forest, he had been there for nearly 2 years. He was taller, leaner, and stronger. He moved with a quiet confidence, his wooden spoon in his belt and his lodestone compass in his pocket. "It is time," Silas said one crisp morning. "You have learned the hands weaving, the eyes tracking, and the heart mercy. Now you must learn the truth." They walked to a place Leo had never visited. It was a crater-like depression in the earth, surrounded by white birch trees that looked like ghosts standing guard. In the center lay Echo Lake. The water was perfectly still. It was dark, almost black, and gave off no reflection of the sky or the trees. It looked like a hole in the world. "Do not drink," Silas warned. "This water is not for the body, it is for the mind." Leo stood at the edge. "What do I do?" "You look," Silas said. "But do not look for your own face. The Echo Lake does not show what is there. It shows what is hidden." Leo knelt on the mossy bank. He leaned over the dark water. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then the water began to swirl, though there was no wind. Colors appeared. Shapes formed. The darkness cleared, replaced by a scene that was bright, harsh, and artificial. It was an office. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Leo saw his father. But this wasn't the father Leo knew, the man scrubbing pots with angry silence. This was a man standing in front of a desk, his head bowed. Behind the desk sat another man, red-faced and shouting. Leo couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. The boss was humiliating him. He was pointing a finger, slamming a hand on the table. Leo watched his father. He saw his father's hands clench into fists at his sides, trembling. He saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He saw the desire to shout back, to quit, to storm out. But then Leo saw his father take a breath. He saw him unclench his fists. He saw him swallow his pride. He nodded, accepted the abuse, and went back to work. Leo realized why. He did it for the paycheck. He did it so Leo could have shoes. He did it so there would be food in the fridge. The scene shifted. Now it was late at night, the kitchen of Leo's house. His mother was sitting at the table. It was the same scene Leo had run away from, the bills. But now, Leo was seeing it from the front, not from his angry perspective in the doorway. He saw her face. She wasn't cold. She was terrified. She was counting coins from a jar. She was writing numbers, crossing them out and writing them again. Tears were streaming down her face, but she wasn't making a sound. She was crying silently, holding her breath, so she wouldn't wake Leo upstairs. She looked at a photo of Leo on the fridge. She touched it gently. Her lips moved. "I'm sorry," she seemed to be saying. "I'm trying." The water went black again. Leo pulled back, gasping as if he had been underwater. He sat on the bank, his chest heaving. For his whole life, he had thought his parents were against him. He thought his father's silence was anger at him. He thought his mother's worry was disappointment in him. He was wrong. His father scrubbed the pots so hard because it was the only thing in his life he could make clean and perfect. It was the only control he had. His mother was distant because her mind was a battlefield of numbers, fighting a war to keep the roof over their heads. They weren't villains. They were just two exhausted people carrying a mountain, trying not to let it crush their son. "They are fighting a bear," Leo whispered, his voice cracking. "Every day, and I got mad at them because they didn't have time to play." Silas placed a paw on Leo's knee. "A child sees the parent as a god," the badger said softly. "An adult sees the parent as a person. You have just grown up, Leo." Leo looked at the black water. He felt a terrible ache in his heart, but it wasn't the selfish ache of loneliness anymore. It was the aching of compassion. He wanted to go back, not to be taken care of, but to help them carry the stone. "Can I go home now?" Leo asked. "Not yet," Silas said, standing up. "You understand them now, but you do not yet understand yourself. There is one more gate you must open." The Iron Gate. Winter threatened again. The frost was heavy in the mornings, turning the spiderwebs into lace doilies. Silas led Leo to the northern boundary. The trees here were twisted and black, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air smelled of iron and old snow. Standing between two massive, dead oaks was a gate. It was made of wrought iron, tall and imposing, covered in spikes and intricate swirls. But there was no fence attached to it. It stood alone in the woods. You could easily walk around it. "Why is it here?" Leo asked. "It doesn't block anything." "It blocks everything," Silas corrected. "Try to walk around it." Leo stepped to the left, but as he tried to pass the plane of the gate, an invisible force stopped him. It felt like walking into a mattress. He pushed, but the air itself became solid. He tried the right side. Same result. The gate of grievance, Silas said. It stands across the path home. You cannot go around your own resentment, Leo. You must go through it. Leo walked up to the gate. It was rusted, the metal pitted by centuries of storms. There was a massive iron lock plate, but no keyhole. How do I open it? Leo asked. Iron is stubborn, Silas said. It is the metal of war and walls. It does not yield to force. It does not yield to cleverness. Leo grabbed the bars. He shook them. They were immovable as the mountain. I don't have any resentment, Leo said. I forgave them. I saw them in the lake. You forgave them, Silas said. But have you forgiven yourself? Leo stopped. For what? I didn't do anything. You left, Silas said simply. You walked out the door. You abandoned the people who were fighting for you. The words hit Leo harder than a physical blow. He had been telling himself a story where he was the victim. Poor Leo, no one listens to him. But the truth was he had run away. He had added his absence to their burden. When they found his empty bed, their fear must have been absolute. He felt a wave of shame. It was heavy, cold, and metallic. It tasted like the iron of the gate. I was selfish, Leo whispered. He put his forehead against the cold, rusty bars. I just wanted to be happy, he said to the iron. I didn't want to be part of the sadness, so I ran. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. He wasn't saying it to Silas. He was saying it to the memory of the kitchen. He was saying it to the 12-year-old boy who climbed the fence. I am not that boy anymore, Leo said firmly. I am the one who builds the roof. I am the one who feeds the fox. I am the one who holds the line. He placed his hand flat against the lock plate. He didn't push. He simply accepted the weight of his own mistake. He accepted that he couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. Clank. A deep, resonant sound came from inside the mechanism. It was the sound of a heavy tumbler falling into place. The rust seemed to flake away under his hand. The iron groaned, a sound like a giant waking up. Slowly, heavily, the gate swung inward. It didn't open onto a path. It opened onto a wall of swirling gray mist, the same mist that had trapped him here on the first night. The way is open, Silas said. Leo looked at the mist. He looked back at the forest, at the trees that had sheltered him, at the badger who had raised him. Is this it? Leo asked. Do I leave now? The gate is open, Silas repeated. But the journey is not quite done. You have the wisdom, Leo, but you do not have the gift. You cannot go back empty-handed. Silas turned and began to walk away from the gate. Close it for now, the badger said. It will stay unlocked. But before you cross the threshold, there is something we must make. A final masterpiece. Leo looked at the swirling mist. He could feel the fast world on the other side, vibrating like a hummingbird's wing. He gently pushed the heavy iron gate shut. Clang. He turned and followed Silas back into the trees. He wasn't running away this time. He was just preparing to pack his bags properly. The clockmaker's tree. The forest of stolen time had a heartbeat. Leo had felt it before, a low, thrumming vibration in the ground when he lay still. But he had never found the source until the misty morning of his 3rd year. Silas led him deep into the western woods, a place where the fog never quite lifted. The trees here were twisted, their branches interlocking like fingers clasped in prayer. They stopped before a tree that defied explanation. It was an oak, but it was also a machine. Embedded in the rough, gray bark were gears. Some were small and made of brass, turning slowly. Others were large, rusted iron wheels half swallowed by the wood. A pendulum swung gently from a lower branch, keeping a rhythm that matched the swaying of the leaves. "The clockmaker's tree," Silas whispered. "This is where the lost minutes go." Leo stepped closer. He placed his hand on the trunk. He could feel the vibration. It wasn't the chaotic ticking of a kitchen clock. It was a slow, heavy pulse. Thump, thump, thump. "Why is it here?" Leo asked. "Because humans are careless with time," Silas said. "They drop it, they waste it, they try to kill it. The forest collects the scraps." Silas pointed to a large, brass gear that was spinning wildly, blurring with speed. It gave off a high, whining sound, like a mosquito. "Look at that one," Silas said. "That is the time of a worried man. He is rushing. He thinks if he moves faster, he will be safe, but he is only stripping the gears." Leo thought of his father. He thought of the frantic scrubbing of the pots. That was what his father's time looked like, spinning so fast it created heat but no movement. "And this one," Leo pointed to a large wooden cog near the roots. It was barely moving. It turned perhaps 1 inch every hour. "That is the time of a mountain," Silas said. "Or a sleeping child. That is deep time. It is strong." "My parents are stuck in the fast gear," Leo said softly. "They don't know how to slow down." "You must learn to govern the spring," Silas told him. "Put your hand on the fast gear, Leo." Leo hesitated. The brass wheel was spinning dangerously fast. "Do not use your strength," Silas warned. "If you push it, it will burn you. You must use your breath. You must become the slower gear." Leo placed his fingertips lightly on the spinning brass. It felt hot. It vibrated violently against his skin. He closed his eyes. He thought about the winter he spent in the snow. He thought about the slow growth of the moss on the north side of the trees. He thought about the patience of the weaver spider. He slowed his own heart rate. He deepened his breath. In, out. He visualized his own internal clock slowing down. He wasn't in a hurry. He had nowhere to be. He was just here. Under his fingers, the brass gear began to resist less. The whine dropped in pitch. The blur solidified into spokes. Slowly, impossibly, the gear decelerated. It matched Leo's rhythm. It slowed until it was turning with the gentle, lazy cadence of a water wheel. The heat dissipated. The metal cooled. "You see," Silas said, his voice approving. "Time is not a fixed line, Leo. It is a fluid. If you are calm, time expands. If you are anxious, time shrinks." Leo took his hand away. The gear continued to spin slowly, cured of its panic. "I can take this back," Leo realized. "When my dad starts rushing, when he starts to panic, I can be the slow gear. I can put my hand on his arm and slow him down." "You are the regulator," Silas agreed. "You have lived a lifetime in the quiet. You carry enough stillness in you now to stop a storm." Leo looked up at the great tree, filled with the ticking ghosts of human anxiety. He realized that the forest hadn't stolen his time. It had given him the ability to master it. The harvest of silence. The iron gate was unlocked. The lessons were learned. But Leo could not go back empty-handed. He needed to bring a gift, not a physical gift like a toy or a coin. Those things held no value in the house of stress. He needed to bring a medicine. "We must brew the elixir," Silas said. "You must harvest the essence of the Aethelgard." "How do you bottle a forest?" Leo asked. "You craft a vessel," Silas said, "and you fill it with memory." Leo spent a week carving the flask. He chose a piece of heartwood from a fallen cedar tree. It was reddish gold and smelled spicy and rich. He used his stone knife and the skills he had honed over 3 years. He didn't rush. He carved the flask to fit perfectly in the palm of a human hand. He sanded it with river stones until it was as smooth as glass. He carved a stopper from cork bark. It was a beautiful object, simple, warm, and solid. "Now," Silas said, "we fill it." They didn't go to a magical spring. Instead, Silas took Leo on a walk through their territory. "First, the scent of safety," Silas said. He stopped at a massive pine tree. A golden tear of resin had hardened on the bark. It glowed in the sun. Leo carefully scraped the resin into the wooden flask. It smelled of sun and summer afternoons. "Next, the fluid of patience," Silas said. They went to the stream, but Silas didn't want the rushing water. He pointed to a small, quiet eddy behind a rock, where the water moved in a slow, lazy circle, trapped in a moment of rest. Leo dipped the flask and caught that specific, slow water. "Finally," Silas said, "the ash of the hearth." They returned to Leo's hollow tree. The fire circle where he had spent countless nights staring into the flames was cold. Leo took a pinch of the white, clean ash from the center. This was the memory of warmth. This was the reminder that the dark could be kept at bay. He added the ash to the water and resin. He shook the flask gently. Inside, the ingredients didn't just mix, they fused. The liquid turned a deep, clear amber. It didn't slosh like water. It moved slowly, like thick oil or honey. Leo uncorked it and smelled it. The scent hit him instantly. It wasn't just pine or smoke. It smelled like the silence of the snow. It smelled like the comfort of the woven roof during the rain. It smelled like the feeling of finishing a hard job. It was the smell of peace. "How do I use it?" Leo asked, corking the flask tight. "It is not for drinking," Silas said. "It is for anointing, a drop on the pulse, a drop on the pillow. It reminds the body that it is safe to rest." Leo held the flask tight. It felt heavy, vibrating with the slow energy of the clockmaker's tree. This was what his mother needed. A drop of this on her temples when the bills became too much. This was what his father needed. A drop on his wrists when his hands couldn't stop shaking. It was a cure for the fast world. "I am ready," Leo said. He looked around his campsite. The woven roof was still strong. The stone circle was tidy. The fox he had saved was watching from the edge of the clearing. He had come here as a frightened boy, running from noise. He was leaving as a young man, carrying a bottle of silence. "Then let us go to the gate," Silas said. "The mist is thinning, Leo. Your parents are finishing their dinner." Leo stood up. He tucked the wooden flask into his tunic, right next to his heart. He picked up his walking staff. He took one last look at his hollow tree, the only home where he had truly found himself. "Thank you," he whispered to the clearing. Then he turned and followed the badger north. toward the rusted iron bars and the life he had left behind. The threshold. They stood before the iron gate. The mist swirled behind the bars, a wall of shifting gray that looked like heavy smoke. Silas stopped a few feet away. He leaned heavily on his walking stick. For the first time, Leo noticed how old the badger truly was. His muzzle was almost entirely white. His eyes were milky. He belonged to the Aethelgard in the same way a root belongs to the soil. "I cannot cross," Silas said softly. "The fast world has no place for talking badgers. I would just be an animal there, and I have forgotten how to be just an animal." Leo looked at the gate, then back at his friend. He felt a lump in his throat that no amount of swallowing could clear. "I don't want to leave you," Leo said. "You are not leaving me," Silas corrected. "You are taking me with you. Every time you carve a piece of wood, I will be in your hands. Every time you sit still in a quiet room, I will be in your mind." He reached into his satchel and pulled out the wooden spoon Leo had carved years ago. The honest spoon with the crooked handle. "Keep this," Silas said. "Wood remembers." Leo took the spoon. He tucked it into his belt next to the flask of elixir. "What if I forget?" Leo whispered. "The world out there, it's so loud. What if the noise washes it all away?" "The forest is not a dream, Leo," Silas said firmly. "It is a place. You have mud on your boots. You have calluses on your fingers. You have grown 3 inches. The world may try to tell you it was a dream, but your bones will know the truth." The badger stepped forward. He stood on his hind legs and placed his furry paws on Leo's shoulders. He looked deep into Leo's eyes. "You were a frightened kit when I found you," Silas said. "Now you are a guardian. Go. The tea is getting cold." Leo hugged the badger. He smelled the scent of dry leaves and old earth one last time. He memorized the texture of the coarse fur. "Goodbye, Silas," Leo said. He turned to the gate. He pushed it open. The iron groaned, a deep, mournful sound. Leo stepped into the mist. It was cold, not the clean cold of snow, but a damp, clammy cold. The mist blinded him. He felt a sensation of vertigo, as if the ground had dropped away. He felt a stretching sensation. His body felt heavy, then light, then heavy again. The smell of pine vanished. The sound of the wind in the trees vanished. There was a moment of absolute silence, a void between worlds. And then the noise hit him. The return. Leo stumbled. He fell forward, his hands hitting. Grass. Not the deep, mossy floor of the forest, but the short, prickly, manicured grass of a suburban lawn. He gasped, the air tasting of exhaust fumes and cut grass. He pushed himself up. The world spun. He felt strange. He felt small. He looked at his hands. Gone were the calluses. Gone were the scars from the nettles and the knife slips. His hands were soft, smooth, and pale. They were the hands of a 12-year-old boy. He looked down at his body. The woven tunic was gone. He was wearing his old t-shirt and jeans. They weren't frayed. They were clean. He reached for his belt. The wooden spoon was gone. He reached for the wooden flask of elixir. It was gone. Panic flared in his chest. It was a dream. It was all just a dream. But then he reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around something cold and heavy. The lodestone. the magnetic needle the fox had given him. He pulled it out. It was there, solid, real. He let out a shaky breath. He hadn't brought the spoon or the flask, but he had brought the compass. And more importantly, he felt the change inside. Even though his body had shrunk back to childhood, his mind felt vast. He looked at the rusted chain-link fence. It looked flimsy. He looked at the house. It looked like a toy box. He walked toward the back door. He moved with the silent, rolling gait of a forest stalker. He didn't stomp. He flowed. He reached for the door handle. Through the screen, he heard them. "I am being careful." His mother's voice thinned like a wire. "I am always careful." "We just need to be careful this month," his father said. Leo froze. It was the exact same conversation, the exact same sentence he had left on. He had lived a lifetime. He had built roofs, sailed rivers, and healed foxes. He had spent 3 years in the woods. And in this kitchen, not even 10 seconds had passed. Leo opened the door. The air in the kitchen hit him, that thick, static-charged tension. It smelled of cleaning products and anxiety. His parents didn't look up. They were still locked in their cages. His father scrubbing the pot, his mother staring at the bill. Leo walked into the room. Usually, he would have slouched. He would have tried to be invisible. He would have run to his room. But Leo didn't run. He walked to the table. He pulled out his chair. He sat down. He didn't pick up his fork. He just sat there, placing his hands flat on the table. He took a deep breath, in, out. He activated the lesson of the clockmaker's tree. He became the slow gear. He let his own calmness radiate outward. He visualized the elixir of peace he had brewed, the smell of snow and resin. Even though the flask was gone, the recipe was in his blood. He projected that silence into the room. The effect was subtle, but immediate. His father stopped scrubbing. The frantic motion slowed. He put the sponge down. He looked at the sink, confused, as if he had forgotten why he was rushing. His mother stopped reading. She rubbed her eyes, let out a long sigh, and lowered her shoulders. They both looked at Leo. They saw a 12-year-old boy in a t-shirt. But for a split second, they saw something else. They saw the stillness in his eyes. They saw the posture of a king sitting on a throne of moss. "Leo," his mother asked, her voice soft, "are you okay? You look different." Leo looked at her. He didn't see a nagging parent. He saw the weaver spider, tired from holding the web together. "I'm okay, Mom," Leo said. His voice was deeper, calmer than it had been a minute ago. "I'm just here." He stood up and walked over to his father. His father tensed, expecting a complaint. Leo reached out and placed his hand on his father's arm. He didn't grip. He just rested it there, warm and steady. "Dad," Leo said, "the pot is clean. You can stop now." His father looked at the pot. He looked at Leo's hand. The vibration of anxiety in the man's frame met the solid, unmoving rock of Leo's presence. The shaking stopped. "Yeah," his father whispered, his voice sounding thick. "Yeah, it's clean." Leo turned to his mother. He walked over and gently closed the folder of bills. "It will hold," Leo said to her, using the words Silas had used about the roof. "The weave is tight enough, Mom. We can rest for tonight." His mother looked at him, stunned. She didn't know why, but she believed him. The panic in her chest uncoiled. "It's okay," she breathed. "Okay, Leo." The silence in the kitchen changed. It wasn't the heavy, sharp silence of before. It was the warm, comfortable silence of the winter burrow. Leo went back to his chair. He picked up a green pea. He ate it, tasting the sweetness, paying attention to the food. He was back in the fast world, but he wasn't afraid of the noise anymore. He carried the forest inside him, and that was enough to keep the whole house quiet. The concrete garden. The weekend arrived, bringing with it the roar of the suburbs. In every yard, machines were screaming. Lawnmowers, leaf blowers, hedge trimmers. It was a war against nature. The goal of the neighborhood was to beat the earth into submission, flat, green, square, and dead. Leo stood on his back porch, looking at his own yard. It was a perfect rectangle of chemically green grass. "It looks like a carpet," Leo whispered. "Nothing lives here." His father came out, holding a bag of fertilizer. He looked tired, his eyes scanning the grass for weeds as if they were enemy combatants. "Gonna aerate the lawn today," his father said, rubbing his neck. "Then put down the weed killer." "No," Leo said. His father blinked. "What?" "Don't kill it," Leo said calmly. He walked down the steps. He didn't ask for permission. He walked to the corner of the yard where the fence met the garage, a dead, shady spot where nothing grew. He grabbed a shovel. "Leo, that's the drainage area," his father warned. "Nothing grows there." "Ferns will," Leo said, "and hostas and moss." He started to dig. He didn't dig in straight lines. He dug a winding, kidney-shaped bed. He turned the soil, smelling the chemicals in it. It needed to breathe. His father watched him, agitated. He paced. He looked at the fertilizer bag. He wanted to work, but Leo's strange, focused energy stopped him. "You're making a mess," his father said weakly. Leo stopped digging. He leaned on the shovel. He looked at his father with those old, calm eyes. "Dad," Leo said, "why do we want it to look like a golf course? We don't play golf." "It's just what you do. It's tidy." "It's loud," Leo said, "and it's hungry. It takes all your time." Leo reached into his pocket. He pulled out the wooden spoon, the only physical object, other than the compass, that seemed to have survived the crossing, or perhaps he had carved a new one so quickly he didn't remember. He handed the spoon to his father. Then he pulled out a small pocket knife from his jeans. "Here," Leo said. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "The handle is rough," Leo said. "Smooth it out, don't scrape it, just shave the high spots. Go with the grain." His father looked at the knife. He looked at the spoon. "I have to do the lawn." "The lawn can wait," Leo said. "Just sit, please." His father sighed, a heavy, rattling sound. He sat on the porch steps. He picked up the knife. Tentatively, he took a shaving off the wood. Leo went back to digging. For the next 2 hours, a strange thing happened. The leaf blowers in the neighbor's yard whined, but in Leo's yard, there was silence. Leo planted. He transplanted wild violets he found growing in the cracks of the driveway. He moved rocks to create a small border that looked natural, not manufactured. He watered the soil, turning the dust into mud. On the porch, his father kept whittling. At first, his movements were jerky. He was trying to finish the job quickly, but wood doesn't let you rush. If he rushed, the knife stuck. So his father slowed down. His breathing deepened. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. He entered the trance of the hands. When the sun began to set, Leo finished. The corner of the yard looked wild and untidy, but it felt alive. He walked to the porch. His father was holding the spoon. It was incredibly smooth. He was running his thumb over the curve of the wood, a look of wonder on his face. I haven't just sat outside in years, his father said quietly. I didn't think I could. You just needed something for your hands, Leo said. His father looked up. The lawn looks terrible, Leo. The neighbors are going to talk. Let them talk, Leo smiled. We have a spoon. His father laughed. It was a rusty, unused sound, but it was real. Yeah, his father said. We have a spoon. He didn't pick up the fertilizer bag. He left it there. They went inside together, leaving the wild corner of the garden to drink in the twilight, the first reclaimed territory of the fast world. The School of Noise. If the house was the fast world, the middle school was the chaos world. Leo stood at the gates on Monday morning. The noise was a physical wall. Screaming students, slamming lockers, bells ringing like fire alarms, the screech of bus brakes. Before the forest, Leo would have put on headphones. He would have hunched his shoulders and tried to shrink. Today, Leo stood tall. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of asphalt and cheap body spray. He acknowledged it, and then he let it pass through him. I am the slow gear, he reminded himself. I am the oak tree in the storm. He walked into the hallway. The flow of students was like the rushing river during the melt. Everyone was running, pushing, desperate to get to class or to their friends. Leo didn't run. He walked at a steady, deliberate pace. He moved like a rock in the stream. People instinctively parted around him. His calmness created a bubble of space. He got to his locker. He opened it slowly. Move it, zombie. The voice came from above him. Tyler, the school predator. He was big, loud, and smelled of aggression. Leo turned. Tyler loomed over him. He knocked the books out of Leo's hands. It was a test. He wanted a reaction. He wanted fear or he wanted a fight. Both fed him. The old Leo would have scrambled to pick them up, apologizing. The new Leo didn't move. He looked at the books on the floor. Then he looked up at Tyler. He didn't glare. He didn't look angry. He looked at Tyler with the same expression he had used on the mother fox. He looked with curiosity. He looked at Tyler's eyes. They were darting around, looking for an audience. They were terrified of not being the center of attention. He is hungry, Leo thought. Not for food, but for power. He is starving. You dropped these, Tyler sneered, kicking a math book. Leo crouched down. He picked up the book. He stood up. He stepped into Tyler's personal space. Not aggressively, but comfortably. He broke the unwritten rule of fear. You look tired, Tyler, Leo said softly. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. Tyler blinked. His script was broken. What? Your eyes, Leo said. They're red. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Tyler flinched. He stepped back. The truth was his parents were getting divorced. He hadn't slept. He was running on adrenaline and rage. Shut up, Tyler said, but there was no heat in it. The air had gone out of him. It's hard, Leo continued. his voice low and steady under the noise of the hallway. Carrying all that noise around, it makes you heavy. Tyler looked around. The other kids were watching, confused. This wasn't a fight, it was a diagnosis. Leo reached into his pocket. He didn't have the elixir, but he had an apple. He held it out. "Eat," Leo said. "It helps." Tyler stared at the apple. He stared at Leo. For a second, the bully vanished. A tired, scared boy stood there. Tyler didn't take the apple. He swatted Leo's hand away, but weaky. "Weirdo," Tyler muttered. He turned and walked away, but he didn't shove anyone else. He walked with his head down. Leo watched him go. He picked up his apple, wiped it on his shirt, and took a bite. The bell rang. The hallway cleared. Leo walked to class. He realized that the school wasn't scary. It was just a forest of people who had forgotten how to be trees. They were all shaking in the wind, desperate for roots. He sat at his desk. He placed his hands flat on the wood. He was ready to learn history and math, but he knew that the most important subject, silence, was one he would have to teach himself. The Secret Society of Quiet. The school library was the only place in the building where the air didn't vibrate with aggression. It smelled of old paper and dust, a scent that comforted Leo. It reminded him of the Hall of the Lost in the Aethelgard. He went there during lunch. He didn't eat. The cafeteria was too loud, a chaotic roar of plastic trays and shouting voices. He preferred the hunger to the noise. Leo walked to the back corner, past the rows of encyclopedias that no one opened anymore. He found a table by a window that looked out onto the gray parking lot. He sat down. He placed his hands flat on the table, entering his resting state. He breathed in the silence, expanding it inside his chest until it formed a shield against the rest of the school. Then he noticed her. At the table across the aisle sat a girl. She was about his age, with dark hair tied back in a severe, practical knot. She was wearing a sweater that looked hand-knitted, oversized, and gray. She wasn't reading. She wasn't looking at a phone. She wasn't doing homework. She was simply sitting. Leo watched her. Most people, when they sit, are vibrating with potential motion. They tap their feet. They click pens. They shift their weight. This girl was absolute stillness. She sat with the poise of a heron waiting in the reeds. Her gaze was fixed on a single dust mote floating in a shaft of sunlight. Leo recognized that stillness. It wasn't the boredom of a student. It was the patience of a survivor. He watched her for 5 minutes. She didn't blink more than necessary. She didn't fidget. She has been there too, Leo thought. Not my forest, but somewhere. He stood up. He moved quietly, his sneakers making no sound on the carpet. He walked to her table. She didn't jump. She sensed his approach and turned her head slowly. Her eyes were the color of sea glass, pale and sharp. They held the same deep, ancient look that Silas had possessed. "Is this seat taken?" Leo asked softly. "The chair is empty," she replied. Her voice was low and rough, like she wasn't used to using it often. Leo sat down. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't ask, "What grade are you in?" Or, "Who do you hang out with?" Those were fast-world questions. Leo reached into his pocket. He pulled out the lodestone, the dark, magnetic needle. He placed it on the table. It spun once and pointed north. The girl looked at it. She didn't ask what it was. She understood the language of objects. She reached into the pocket of her sweater. She pulled out a small object and placed it on the table. It was a piece of white coral. It was bleached by the sun, porous and light. It smelled faintly of salt and brine. "The sunken reef," she whispered. "The Aethelgard forest," Leo replied. "How long?" she asked. 3 years, Leo said, "but only an hour here." 5 years, she said. The tide was very slow. They sat in silence. It was the most profound conversation Leo had had since returning. He realized he wasn't crazy. He wasn't a freak. He was simply a traveler who had come home, and here was another one. There were probably others, scattered through the city, children who walked too quietly, who stared at birds for too long, who knew how to build fires and weave nets. They were a secret society without a name, the Returners. "It's loud here," the girl said, looking toward the door where the bell would soon ring. "It's only loud if you let it inside," Leo said. "You have to be the heavy rock." "I try," she said. She touched the piece of coral. "But sometimes I miss the water. I miss the weight of it." "The water is still here," Leo said. "It's just hiding in the pipes, just like the forest is hiding in the lumber of the desks." She looked at the wooden table. She ran her hand over the grain. She smiled, a small, private smile. The bell rang. The harsh electric scream filled the room. Neither of them flinched. They stood up slowly, gathering their totems, the stone and the coral. "See you tomorrow," Leo said. "Tomorrow," she agreed. They walked out into the chaos of the hallway together. They didn't speak, but they walked in rhythm, two islands of calm moving through a sea of noise, no longer drowning because now they knew how to swim. The urban forager. The city was covered in concrete, but Leo knew that concrete was just a scab. The earth was underneath, waiting to heal. On Saturday morning, Leo convinced his parents to go for a walk. Not a power walk for exercise, and not a walk to get to a destination. A wander. "We're just going to look," Leo told his father, who was already checking his watch. "Look at what?" his father asked. "It's just the neighborhood. We've seen it 1,000 times." "You've walked past it," Leo corrected. "You haven't seen it." They walked down the sidewalk. The suburban street was lined with manicured lawns and parked cars. Leo stopped at a crack in the pavement. Growing out of the fissure was a small plant with jagged leaves and a bright yellow flower. "A dandelion," his mother said dismissively. "A weed." Leo crouched down. "Look at the roots, Mom. There is no soil here, just gravel and cement. But it found a way. It drove a taproot down through the stone to find water." He touched the petals gently. "It's not a weed," Leo said. "It's a pioneer. It's fixing the ground so other things can grow. It's medicine." His mother looked closer. She saw the determination of the small plant. She saw the vibrant yellow against the gray. "It is brave, isn't it?" she whispered. They kept walking. Leo showed them the world through the eyes of the forest. He pointed out the moss growing on the north side of the brick post office. "It's making oxygen," he told them. "It's drinking the rain." He showed them a squirrel running along a telephone wire. "He's using the city like a canopy highway. He doesn't see streets, he sees bridges." They reached the edge of the town. where an old, abandoned factory stood. A chain-link fence surrounded it. "Ugh, an eyesore," his father grumbled. "Look up," Leo said, pointing to the rusted water tower on top of the factory. His father squinted. "What?" "The ledge, the dark shape." Suddenly, the shape moved. Wings unfolded, massive and broad. A red-tailed hawk launched itself from the metal tower. It soared over the parking lot, crying out a piercing, wild scream that echoed off the brick walls. It dove, snatched a pigeon from the air, and returned to its perch. "A hunter," his father breathed, awe in his voice. "Right here in town." "The wilderness didn't leave," Leo said. "We just built walls around it. But the hawk doesn't care about the walls. The dandelion doesn't care about the concrete." Leo led them to a small park. He sat on a bench. His parents sat beside him. Usually, his father would be checking his phone. His mother would be making a mental grocery list. But today they watched. His father watched an ant carrying a crumb across the bench. He watched it navigate the mountainous terrain of the wood grain. His mother closed her eyes and tilted her face to the sun. She wasn't worrying about the electric bill. She was just feeling the heat, the same way the pine trees in the Aethelgard absorbed the southern light. "It's peaceful," his father said, sounding surprised. "I didn't think you could find quiet in the city." "The quiet isn't a place," Leo said, touching the spot on his chest where the elixir flask used to be. "It's a frequency. You just have to tune into it." Leo looked at his parents. They looked younger. The deep lines of stress around his father's mouth had softened. His mother's hands were resting open in her lap, not clenched. They were learning to forage, not for berries or nuts, but for moments. They were harvesting small scraps of peace from the cracks in their busy lives. Leo leaned back. He smelled the exhaust of a passing bus, but underneath it, he smelled the damp earth of the park and the faint scent of rain coming on the wind. He was the ranger of the suburbs now, and his family was finally learning how to survive in the wild. The unfinished symphony. The attic was a graveyard of abandoned hobbies. There were dusty skis, a deflated yoga ball, and boxes of books that hadn't been opened in a decade. Leo was up there looking for a blanket when he found the case. It was black, covered in gray dust, and tucked behind the water heater. He opened the latches. The metal clicked loudly in the silence. Inside lay an acoustic guitar. It was beautiful, but it was broken. The neck had cracked near the headstock, a jagged wound in the mahogany. 2 strings were missing, and the others were rusted. "Dad's old guitar," Leo whispered. He remembered seeing a photo of his father playing it, young and smiling, before the mortgage and the job took over. Leo carried it downstairs. He took it to the garage. He didn't know how to play music, but he knew wood. He knew that wood wanted to be whole. He found a bottle of wood glue. He found a clamp. He treated the repair like surgery. He cleaned the splintered edges of the crack. He applied the glue with a small brush, spreading it evenly. He pressed the pieces together. Tension, he thought. Just enough to hold, not enough to crush. He clamped it. He wiped away the excess glue. Then he sat and watched it dry. For 3 days, he worked on the instrument. He polished the fretboard with lemon oil until the rosewood drank it in and turned dark and rich. He bought new strings with his allowance. When he strung the guitar, he didn't tune it to a standard scale. He didn't know EADGB. He tuned it to the forest. He tightened the low string until it hummed like the clockmaker's tree, a deep, resonant thrum. He tightened the high string until it sounded like the wind whistling through the pine needles. He sat in the living room. His parents were watching the news, their faces bathed in the blue light of the TV, absorbing the stress of the world. Leo plucked a string. The note hung in the air. It wasn't a song. It was a vibration. He played the sound of the rain. He brushed his fingers rapidly across the strings, creating a shimmering, falling texture. His father looked away from the TV. He stared at the guitar. "I haven't heard that thing in 20 years, his father said. "I thought it was broken." "It just needed to heal," Leo said. He changed the rhythm. He played the sound of the river, a rolling, continuous melody that rose and fell. He didn't play chords. He played landscapes. His mother turned down the volume on the TV. "What song is that?" she asked. "It's the river," Leo said. "The one that runs through the gray rocks." He closed his eyes. He wasn't in the living room anymore. He was back on his raft, guiding the fawn to safety. The music flowed out of him, carrying the memory of the water. His father stood up. He walked over and sat on the arm of the sofa, watching Leo's hands. "Can I try?" his father asked softly. Leo handed him the guitar. His father held it awkwardly at first. His fingers were stiff. He tried to form a G chord, the way he had learned in college. "Don't try to make it perfect, Dad," Leo whispered. "Just listen to the wood." His father let go of the chord shape. He just strummed. Open strings. The sound was dissonant but warm. His father closed his eyes. He began to pick out a simple, slow melody. It was sad, but it was beautiful. It was the sound of a man who was tired but still had something to say. For the rest of the evening, the TV stayed off. The house was filled with the sound of the guitar being passed back and forth. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The wood was doing the talking for them. The storm on the roof. 2 weeks later, the sky turned a bruised purple. The air pressure dropped so fast Leo could feel it in his teeth. A summer storm, a big one. The wind hit the house like a hammer. Rain lashed against the siding. Thunder shook the floorboards. And then snap. The streetlights went dark. The house plunged into blackness. The hum of the refrigerator died. The Wi-Fi signal vanished. "Oh no," his mother gasped from the kitchen. "The power, the food in the freezer. My phone is at 10%. "Where are the flashlights?" His father's voice rose in panic. "I can't see anything." Leo sat on the living room rug. He smiled in the dark. This was familiar. This was the long sleep of winter. "Don't move," Leo said calmly. "I've got it." He moved through the dark house with perfect confidence. He didn't need to see. He had the map of sense and the memory of the room. He found the candles in the drawer. He found the matches. One by one, he lit them. He placed them on the mantelpiece, on the table, on the floor. The harsh electric darkness was replaced by a soft, flickering orange glow. "It's going to get cold," his father worried. "The AC is off." "Then we build a burrow," Leo said. He pulled the cushions off the sofa. He gathered the blankets from the bedrooms. He dragged the dining chairs into the living room. Leo, what are you doing? His mother asked, holding a candle. Making a roof, Leo said. He arranged the chairs in a circle. He draped the heaviest blankets over them. He used heavy books to anchor the corners, creating tension so the roof wouldn't sag. It was a fortress of wool and cotton. Come inside, Leo invited. His parents hesitated. It seemed silly. They were adults. They shouldn't be crawling under blankets. But the house was dark and the storm was loud. The fort looked warm. They crawled in. Inside, the space was small and intimate. Leo had placed a single candle in a safe glass jar in the center. The light reflected off the blankets, turning the interior into a golden cave. It was quiet in there. The roar of the storm felt distant. They sat cross-legged on the cushions. "What do we do now?" his father asked. He reached for his phone, then remembered there was no signal. He looked lost. "We wait," Leo said. "We listen." They listened to the rain drumming on the roof of the house. "It sounds like the drums in the Aethelgard," Leo said softly. "When the rain hit my woven roof, it sounded just like this." "Tell us," his mother said. "Tell us about the roof you built." So Leo told them. He told them about the first night in the rain, when he was wet and miserable. He told them about Silas teaching him to weave willow branches. He told them how he failed and how he tried again. He spoke for an hour. His parents listened, captivated. In the candlelight, Leo didn't look like a child. He looked like a storyteller. His father lay back on a cushion, staring at the blanket ceiling. "I used to build forts," his father murmured. "When I was 7, I used the card table." "Why did you stop?" Leo asked. "I got too big," his father said. "I couldn't fit any more." "You fit now," Leo said. His father smiled. He reached out and squeezed Leo's hand. "Yeah, I guess I do." The power didn't come back on until morning, but no one complained. They fell asleep in the living room fortress, huddled together like a family of foxes in a den, safe and warm while the storm raged outside. Leo fell asleep listening to his parents' breathing. It was a steady, rhythmic sound, the sound of people who had finally stopped running. The silent birthday. In the fast world, birthdays were usually loud affairs. They meant frantic cleaning, expensive dinners at crowded restaurants, and the anxiety of spending money they didn't really have. It was his mother's birthday. Leo watched her that morning. She was already tense, checking her phone, likely expecting a generic text from a distant relative or worrying about making a reservation. "Don't worry about dinner," Leo told her before he left for school. "I'll handle it." "Leo, we can just order pizza," she sighed. "I don't want a mess." "No mess," Leo promised. "Trust me." When he came home, he didn't start a frantic cooking session. He started a ritual. He went to the grocery store with the money he had saved from his allowance. He didn't buy frozen food. He bought vegetables. Carrots, potatoes, onions, fresh thyme, and a loaf of crusty bread. He entered the kitchen and closed the door. He turned off the overhead lights, working only by the light of the stove hood. He began to cook the way Silas had taught him. Chop the onion, respect the layers, peel the potato, don't waste the flesh. He made a rustic vegetable stew. In the Aethelgard, stew was a celebration because it meant warmth. He sautéed the vegetables slowly, letting them caramelize, releasing their sweetness. He added the herbs at the very end so their scent wouldn't burn away. When his parents came into the kitchen at 6 o'clock, they stopped. The table was set, not with fancy tablecloths, but with simple placemats. Leo had placed a single small candle in the center. There was no music playing, no TV blaring in the background. "Sit," Leo said. He served the stew. It was simple peasant food, but the smell was rich and comforting. "This looks wonderful," his father said, sounding surprised. They ate. Usually, dinner was a race. Eat fast, wash up, get back to the screens. But Leo ate slowly. He tasted the time. He chewed the bread. His parents, unconsciously mirroring him, slowed down too. "It tastes like earth," his mother said. "In a good way, it tastes real." When the bowls were empty, Leo didn't bring out a store-bought cake with sugary icing. He brought out a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a piece of twine he had twisted himself. He placed it in front of his mother. "Happy birthday," Leo said. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a small wooden carving. It wasn't intricate or professional, but it was smooth as glass. It was a bird, a wren. Its head was tucked under its wing, asleep. It was a bird at rest. Leo had carved it from a piece of maple he found in the park. He had spent hours sanding it, thinking about how tired his mother always looked, and how much he wanted her to feel safe enough to sleep. His mother picked it up. She ran her thumb over the curve of the wing. The wood was warm. Oh, she didn't say, "It's pretty." She started to cry. They weren't the frantic, silent tears of the bill-paying nights. They were soft tears. "It's so quiet," she whispered, holding the wooden bird to her chest. "It's the most peaceful thing I've ever held." "That's because I made it slow," Leo said. "I put the quiet inside it." She reached out and took Leo's hand. "Thank you. I didn't want anything else. I just wanted this." They sat at the table for a long time, watching the candle burn down. For the first time in years, his mother didn't look like she was calculating the cost of the evening. She looked like the bird Leo had carved, resting, finally safe in her own nest. The call of the mist. October deepened. The air grew sharp and metallic. Life in the house had stabilized. The garden was wild and brown, preparing for winter. The guitar was played every evening. The slow gear was turning smoothly. But Lee began to feel a pull. It started as a physical sensation. The lodestone in his pocket, which usually felt like a cold pebble, began to feel warm. Sometimes it vibrated against his thigh, a low, buzzing hum like a trapped bee. Whenever he walked north, toward the rusted fence and the woods beyond, the stone pulled harder. It felt heavy, dragging him toward the tree line. Then came the dreams. For months, Leo had slept dreamlessly, the deep, restorative sleep of the Aethelgard. But now, his nights were filled with mist. In his dreams, he was back in the hollow tree, but the fire was out. The woven roof was torn. He saw Silas. The badger was sitting on his rock, looking old and frail. He wasn't speaking. He was just looking at the empty space where Leo used to sit. He looked lonely. Leo would wake up with a gasp, his heart hammering. He would smell pine needles in his bedroom, strong and pungent, before the scent faded into the smell of laundry detergent. "What's wrong?" Leo asked the stone one evening. He sat at his desk, holding the compass needle. It spun frantically, pointing north, north, north. "Is something wrong with the forest? Or is something wrong with me?" He went to school, but he felt disconnected. The noise of the hallway, which he had learned to tolerate, began to grate on him again. It felt sharp, abrasive. He met the girl in the library, Sarah. They had finally exchanged names. She looked at him. She saw the dark circles under his eyes. "You hear it too," she said. It wasn't a question. "Hear what?" "The tide," she said, touching her piece of coral. "It's calling. The water is low. The path is open." "I thought I was done," Leo whispered. "I fixed things here. I closed the gate." "You can close a gate," Sarah said, looking out the window at the gray sky. "But you can't stop the wind from blowing through the cracks. You left a part of yourself there, Leo." Leo nodded. He knew she was right. He had left his childhood in the forest. He had left his fear. But he had also left his teacher. That night, the pull was unbearable. The lodestone was so hot he couldn't keep it in his pocket. He placed it on his nightstand. It rattled against the wood. Leo got out of bed. He went to the window. He looked out at the backyard. The mist was there. It wasn't a dream. A thick, white fog was rolling over the fence, swallowing the wild garden he had planted. It swirled against the glass of the back door. It was waiting. Leo dressed in the dark. He put on his jeans and his hoodie. He grabbed the lodestone. He walked downstairs, his feet silent on the floorboards. He opened the back door. The cold, damp air hit him. He walked to the fence. The mist parted slightly, revealing a path that shouldn't exist, a path through the chain link, leading into the deep, dark trees. "Silas," Leo whispered. There was no answer, only the wind sighing through the branches. "Come home," it seemed to say. "Come back to the time that waits." Leo stood on the threshold. He looked back at his house. It was dark and peaceful. His parents were asleep, safe, healed by the silence he had brought them. But his heart was beating, with a rhythm that belonged to the woods. He climbed the fence. He stepped into the white void. He wasn't running away this time. He was answering a call. And he knew with a terrifying certainty that this time he might not be coming back the same way. The last winter. The mist parted, and Leo stepped onto the moss. He was back. But the Aethelgard was not as he remembered it. It was silent. The birds were not singing. The wind was not rustling the leaves. The trees stood rigid and still, as if holding their breath. It was snowing. A soft, relentless white powder that fell straight down, covering the forest floor in a blanket of silence. Leo ran. He didn't need a map. His feet remembered the way to the hollow. He found the great petrified tree. The woven roof he had built years ago or days ago in the fast world was still there, but it was sagging under the weight of the snow. The fire circle was cold. "Silas," Leo called out. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet air. He crawled into the burrow. Silas was there. The badger was lying on his bed of dry grass and sage. He was curled up, his striped head resting on his paws. He looked smaller than Leo remembered. The fur, once thick and coarse, looked thin and gray. Silas opened one eye. It was cloudy, like a marble worn down by the sea. "You heard the call," Silas whispered. His voice was no longer gravel, it was dry leaves. "I came as fast as I could," Leo said, kneeling beside him. He touched the badger's shoulder. It was cold. "I am wintering, Leo," Silas said. "The deep winter." "I can help," Leo said, panic rising in his chest. "I have the herbs, I can make the tea, I can fix the roof." "No," Silas said gently. "You cannot fix a sunset, you just watch it." Leo sat back. He realized with a heavy heart that this wasn't an injury. This was time. The one thing the forest usually stole was finally collecting its due. "I was a boy once," Silas said suddenly, his eyes looking past Leo at the wooden roof. "A long time ago. I ran away from a war, I hid here, and I stayed. I stayed until I forgot how to be a boy. I became the woods." He looked at Leo. "You did not stay. You went back. That makes you stronger than me." "I missed you," Leo said, tears hot on his face. "And I missed you," Silas sighed. "It was quiet without you, too quiet." The badger shifted, getting comfortable. "Do not be sad, guardian," Silas murmured. "I am not leaving. I am just changing. I will be the roots of the oak. I will be the moss on the stone. I will be the silence between the snowflakes." He closed his eyes. "Stay with me," Silas whispered, "until the snow stops." Leo stayed. He didn't build a fire. He didn't try to warm the air. He simply sat in the dark, holding the badger's rough paw. He sat for hours. He sat through the long, slow night of the Aethelgard. He listened to the badgers breathing slow down. In, out, in, out. And then just silence. The snow outside stopped falling. The clouds broke. A single shaft of silver moonlight pierced the canopy and struck the entrance of the burrow. Leo didn't cry. He felt a deep, hollow ache, like a tree that has lost a limb, but he also felt a strange peace. Silas wasn't gone. The forest felt exactly the same. The presence was still there. It had just diffused into the earth. "Goodbye, old friend," Leo whispered. He reached into his pocket. He took out the lodestone, the compass the fox had given him. He placed it gently on the bed of grass, right where Silas's heart had been. "Show him the way," Leo said to the stone. He crawled out of the hollow. The air was crisp and cold. The Aethelgard was waiting. The vacancy had opened. The position of the badger was empty. The bridge of roots. Leo stood in the clearing. The snow was pristine, untouched. He felt the question hanging in the air. The trees were watching him. "Stay," the forest seemed to whisper. "Stay and keep the watch. Take the burrow, wear the fur, be the timeless one. You can live here forever, safe from the noise." It was a tempting offer. To never have to worry about grades or money or time. To just be. Leo looked at his hands. They were the hands of a 12-year-old boy again. But inside, they felt like the hands of a maker. He thought of his parents. He thought of the wild garden in the backyard. He thought of the guitar that sounded like a river. He thought of Sarah in the library, holding her piece of coral, waiting for someone to sit with her. If he stayed, he would be safe, but they would be lonely. "No," Leo said aloud. The wind sighed through the branches, a sound of disappointment and respect. "I am not the badger," Leo told the trees. "I am the bridge." He couldn't live here, but he didn't have to leave it behind either. He could carry it back. He could be the ambassador of the slow world in the fast world. He turned toward the mist. He walked past the frozen stream where he had built the raft. He walked past the spider's loom. He walked past the Hall of the Lost. He reached the iron gate. It stood open, just as he had left it. The mist swirled beyond the bars, gray and thick. Leo stepped through. The transition was gentle this time. No vertigo, no shock, just a soft step from soft earth to wet grass. He was back in his yard. It was dawn. The sun was just rising over the suburban rooftops, painting the vinyl siding of the houses in soft pinks and golds. His wild garden was covered in dew. The ferns he had planted were thriving. Leo walked to the back door. He opened it and stepped into the kitchen. The house was quiet. His parents were still asleep. Leo walked to the living room. He picked up the guitar. He touched the wood. It felt cool and solid. He sat on the floor and watched the sun come up through the window. He felt the loss of Silas, a sharp pang in his chest. But then he breathed. In, out. He felt the stillness. It was inside him. The forest wasn't a place on a map. It was a room in his heart, and he held the key. Epilogue, 20 years later. The shop was located on a quiet street at the edge of the city. There was no neon sign, just a wooden plaque that read, El Grey Woodwork and Restoration. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, beeswax, and patience. A bell chimed as a customer walked in. A man in a suit, looking hurried, checking his watch. "I need this chair fixed," the man said, tapping his foot. "It's an antique. The leg is wobbly. Can you do it by Tuesday?" From the back of the shop, a man emerged. He was tall, with a beard that showed the first hints of gray. He wore a canvas apron covered in sawdust. His eyes were dark and incredibly calm. Leo looked at the customer. He didn't look at the watch. He looked at the man's eyes. "Tuesday is rushing it," Leo said softly. His voice was deep like a cello. "Glue takes time to cure. If we rush, it breaks again." The customer stopped tapping his foot. There was something about Leo's voice that acted like a sedative. "I suppose I can wait," the man said, his shoulders dropping. "Sit," Leo said, gesturing to a bench near the window where the afternoon sun hit a pot of ferns. "Have some tea. It's pine needle and mint." Leo picked up the broken chair. He ran his large, scarred hand over the wood, finding the grain, feeling the history of the tree. He smiled. He wasn't just fixing furniture. He was fixing time. One chair, one customer, one quiet moment at a time. On the workbench, in a place of honor, sat a small, incredibly old wooden spoon with a crooked handle. And next to it, a piece of white coral. Leo picked up his chisel. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the forest that lived in the wood shavings. He began to work, and the world, for just a moment, slowed down to watch. The end.